course tonight is session 2. Are you ready to awaken to the greater understanding of yourself and the universe with Kim Robinson? Kim, take it away.
Thanks, Brownie. Hi, everybody. Welcome back, and welcome to anybody that might be new or joining the call for the first time. It's great to see so many people on here. This is really warms my heart to know that we're getting some good numbers on a call for a journey and a journey back to you, because as we know, it is the most important journey that all of us can take at the moment. So firstly, a big thank you to all of you for joining. That is really very special for me. Just to recap on the ground rules, if we can all just have respect for each other. Any questions, if we can leave them till the end, and raise your hand if you do have a question that you would like to ask. I would ask that the questions are kept to the material that we have presented today. A lot of times what we find is that, I'm happy to talk about anything really, but some of the questions may be covered off in later sessions. And if we can just ask if people don't talk over each other at the end of the call when there are questions and answers. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, has that come up for everybody? Yeah, okay, great. Now, just so that you are aware as well, I cannot see the chat when I'm in this mode here. So just remember that I won't see any questions, so I cannot address them until the end of the show. Alrighty, let's have a little bit of a recap on what we covered last time. So last time we looked at the levels of consciousness, how we're made up from a spiritual perspective. We looked at the relationship between the inner child, the conscious self, and the higher self, and we spent a little bit of time actually having a look at that inner child, because it is such an important part of us. We looked at how the control has happened, how easy we know now, how easy it is, and how easy it has been to instigate the level of control that we have seen over many, many years, hundreds of years, thousands of years actually, and how it shapes, how they use our inner child to actually shape that programming. The same principles we use to program the population as we use to program a child. We know how easy that is. So by speaking to and manipulating the inner child, you can easily shape the world when you have the tools and you know how to do it. We looked at how to start reconnecting with our inner child so that you start to operate from a conscious point of awareness. And there was the sheets there that went into the chat. They are also on my channel on how you can connect with your inner child so that you can start to operate from that higher level of consciousness, or have that control over you rather than letting that inner child control you. So remember that we have been talking with ourselves all of our life, and this voice in our head is our inner child. And when you start to develop that relationship, it becomes much easier for you to consciously direct your life rather than leaving it to a child who can only do the best that it can with its limited reasoning ability and operate from a place of memory. This week, we are going to take a deeper look at dependency, authority, and responsibility. This is a very, very big part of our life, the journey of programming and the cycle of that. We'll look at working with yourself to become the authority over you and your life. We'll also have a look at what that means on a spiritual level and what it actually does. And of course, we give you the tools to take that back to control of you. Now, just before I dive into it, I do want to say that there are always exceptions to the norm. So what we're really looking at here is the state that most people have been in for most of their lives. It's not to say that that is 100% you. You may have been on a journey of learning all of your life. You may have integrated a lot of these tools. So keep in mind that there are always exceptions to the rules. Okay, so let's kick this off with dependency and programming. So many of the problems we experience in life are as a direct result or indirect result of dependency. So we've got dependency on people, we've got dependency on the government, a job, a promise. Some have dependency on drugs or alcohol, anything else that we may be attached to or have gotten used to. So this dependent life has been in part by design of the deep state for thousands of years to keep us in a state of submissiveness. But we also play a large role in this by not taking the time, not making the effort to be our own authority, to stand in our own power, to live from a conscious state of awareness rather than from a subconscious state of awareness. Most are governed by a host of authority figures. Some of them we're not even aware of, telling you what to do, how to live your life, making decisions on your behalf, providing money to survive, and the list goes on. And it leaves very, very little room for you to make decisions on your own, to exercise your rights, to express yourself personally, which in turn, all of that stunts your personal growth and happiness, stunts your spiritual development. And we know that the design of this planet has been to keep us in a state of busyness so that we don't actually focus on ourselves and what it means to be a conscious being. So let's have a look at the global program. So for thousands of years, there has been this global program to keep humanity vibrating at a lower frequency, making it easier to keep us locked into a programmable dependent state where our thoughts, emotions, and actions can be subtly manipulated at every level. So how does that happen? Firstly, by the splicing of our DNA, and we covered this off in the history sessions, inhibiting us from following the natural path of our evolution. So that ensured we remained disconnected from our higher selves, from a higher state of consciousness, and it limited our ability to access a deeper awareness and self-mastery. So it was a systematic plan that was put in place and one that is extended through every single aspect of our existence, manifesting in multitudes of ways, all aimed at disrupting the balance of the body, of the mind, and the spirit. Take the secret covenant, for example, for which I'm sure that most of you are aware of, the degradation of the family unit, the manipulation of education, the corruption of societal norms, and the perpetual cycle of war and conflict. By suppressing the natural evolution, these programs ensure that we continue to operate from the level of the inner child, where emotions such as fear and anger and dependency are easily exploited. Some of the other ways that they have done this is by specifically attacking the pineal gland. Now, the pineal gland is the pathway into consciousness and into a higher awareness. That's our connection, a pathway for our connection to our higher selves, which is our connection to source. So remaining trapped in these lower emotional states, we became more suggestible and programmable, making it easier to shape our perceptions and responses to the world around us. This system of control is introduced gradually through movies, newspapers, music, other forms of media, you name it, they will use it. What that means is that what they tell you is embedded. These ideas are embedded into the subconscious. You become desensitized to it. It reduces your natural state of resistance when these things that they are telling us in these types of media eventually manifest into reality. It's already swirling around in your subconscious. You already on that subconscious level understand what it is that they are going to do. It becomes then a part of the norm. It's called predictive programming, and it ensures compliance through familiarity, making new levels of control feel normal or even necessary when they come into play. In addition to that, we've got technological infrastructures that have been implemented to disrupt our natural energy, such as power lines above and below ground. They interfere with Earth's natural higher frequencies, preventing humans from fully attuning to their surroundings and those higher frequencies. The HARP technologies, 5G towers, and prior to that, the other towers that were used, 4G, 3G, etc. Again, designed to manipulate the electromagnetic fields, further disrupting our energetic and spiritual developments. All of these technologies, and there are many, many more. We could almost do a single session on them, actually, but that's not what this series is about. So these technologies work in unison to keep human consciousness in a low frequency state. It limits our potential for spiritual expansion and self-awareness. That's the global program in a very, very short nutshell. So let's bring it back to you. We need to ask ourselves a few questions, and rarely do we do this. How often do we actually do what we want to do? How often do you do things because they will please someone else, perhaps to win their approval? Now, there is a difference of doing something because you think it will please someone and you will gain approval from them, as opposed to being of service to others. There is a big difference, and when you reach that point, you definitely know what that difference is. How often have you made sacrifices and compromise to avoid confrontation, or simply because you thought you had to, especially when it goes against every grain in your body? How programmed are you into believing that your spouse, your children, your parents, or your friends' welfare is more important than your own? If we can't look after ourselves, how can we expect ourselves to look after others? If you've gone ahead with a decision a loved one disapproves of, do you feel guilty or miserable, expecting to be punished by life or trying to make it up to them? How often do you comply to a higher authority, such as the government or maybe an officer of the law, when it is outside reasonable bounds? Now, in this here, I'm quite sure a lot of you out there will know that what has been unfolding, most of you here are very aware of the government constraints and where they're going with this, and the system that they have created. Now, I'm not talking here about things like having a driver's license. Some things we need to operate with to actually make our life work. I'm talking about unreasonable demands from the government, such as what we have all just been through in the last 5 years. So when you really begin to analyze your situation, you start to identify the authority figures or entities in your life. Perhaps it starts revealing things that you haven't previously been aware of. When we're submissive to a figure or entity or authority, it is at this point that we give our power away. If we're not in agreement, either consciously or subconsciously, of the situation, we create stress in our body, and that can often lead to dis-ease, unease of the body, and the most common foundation of most illnesses that manifest in the physical body. If you actually have a think back over your life and you look at the times and the periods when you were really sick, you will most likely find that you were in a situation where you knew from a gut feeling or by taking a look at what you were doing that you weren't in alignment with what it was that you were in. Be that a relationship, be that a job, be that any situation. So when you are not in alignment with yourself and what you know to be true, this is when it upsets the body's rhythm. So fortunately for us, we can look at and often change our circumstances and so avoid the painful consequences, always remembering that we have free will. There are always choices that we can make. There is always someone there that will give us a helping hand, be it emotionally, physically, spiritually. We all have people to go to. So let's have a look at this cycle. Before you come into the world, you've already chosen your life path and what you want to learn and achieve from the life that you're about to lead. We're going to cover that off in the session on reincarnation. It's quite an in-depth process that we'll go through in that. But it's important to know that you choose your life, you choose your lessons, you choose the people that you are going to interact with in this life. And each of you comes to an agreement before coming in that gives all of you the best opportunity to learn the lessons that you set out. Now, there's different spiritual beliefs on when the soul enters the body. Some say it enters at birth. Some say it comes in and out of the body throughout pregnancy. It doesn't really matter. One thing that is mostly agreed on by many spiritual traditions is that the soul is present around the mother before birth. So that's the start of the process. Remembering that the subconscious records everything, the way the parents live their life, their anxieties, their fear, their love are all being taken in prior to that baby being born. It is all being recorded. So it starts before birth. Even though we've got a much clearer view from outside of the body and we don't have the physical constraints, the process, the programs, etc., are still embedded. So when we're born, we're totally dependent on our parents or carers for survival. Over a period of time, usually the mother becomes the most powerful authority figure in a child's life. It is said that the baby shares the aura of the mother for the first 7 years of its life. So the implications of that are huge. So if you live in a state of anxiety, if you live in a state of fear, if you live in a state of anger, if you live in a state where you are not in alignment with yourself, that energy is transferred over to your child. The child, regardless of whether that is correct or not, is going to pick up on those things anyway. So you are consciously aware from the moment of birth, and you're being programmed day and night from the moment of birth, not only by what's said directly, but also with everything that goes on in the family, in the social situations, in childcare, and so on and so on. So remembering again that the inner child records everything. When you're awake, when you're sleeping, at all times. So any arguments, any love, any anger, tensions, music, television, all add to the emotional stability of the being that is, of the baby, and the programming that it locks in. Quite often, when we have a look at adult trauma, you can actually relate it back to something that happened while being an infant. So the first 7 years of a child's life are where most foundations are set. We not only have input from the parents, but also siblings, grandparents, etc., adding their own authority and programs to the child. Other influences such as television play a role, subliminal programming and training the brain. So I remember back in the day when telly first, was in the early days of television, you would have quite a substantial amount of program that you would see, and ad cycles of it were quite short. Over a period of time, what we can see now and I'm talking about mainstream media here, is you have a cycle of maybe 5 minutes of program, 5 minutes of ad. So what that actually does is it trains the brain to think in 5-minute blocks. It's one of the reasons why so many people these days can only watch a short, for example, TikTok reel, rather than sit down and listen to an hour-long presentation. All of these things, programming from the level from the very beginning when you're an infant and spreading right throughout your adult life. So as we move along in our childhood, we see the introduction of schools and a different set of social circumstances that come with this, and extracurricular activities. So you're now bringing in teachers, other children of a higher age, sports coaches, your peers in your sports or whatever activity that you choose to do. Further authority figures are being brought into the life. All of this adds not only to the programming, but as I said, another level of authority in the form of all of those things. Children learn mostly by example, with much of their character and habits formed by observing their authority figures. Remembering as we develop, we begin to mimic the behavior of those around us. Not what's said, but how we act. This part of us, the inner child, doesn't judge or analyze any of that. It absorbs it, and at some point repeats what it learns. We begin then to learn of external authorities such as school crossing attendants, police, doctors, coaches. When we're a child, all of these figures know much, much more than we do. And all of them at some point tells us what to do. If we obey them, learning our proper place in society, we're rewarded. If we don't, we're punished or berated. So the lessons of obeying and handing our power away are learnt from a very, very young age. And for many, this sets the program of life. So children are more than capable of making some decisions and of accepting some responsibility for themselves. And obviously that expands as you grow. But quite often we as parents continue to treat them like babies, far beyond what they need to be, without asking for their input in decisions that involve them. So this reaffirms to the child that they're too young to do anything. The decisions are not trusted, or they don't need to do anything, for example, around the house. Why would they? They've got parents or slaves to do that for them. If we don't put those boundaries in place, this just doesn't go for parents. This goes for grandparents. This goes for friends. This goes for family. This goes for external. So this process, rather than helping the child to become a conscious being, further deepens the process of dependency on authority figures, ensuring we set the stage for a rules-following, controllable adult. So we move through our schooling with its well-controlled dependency preparation, and we're ready to go out into the world. Most choose to either go to university or get a job, pursue a career, join the military, or go into government welfare. So we've got a whole new set of authority figures to conform to, either the professors at university with their funneling of the education, or maybe a new boss, perhaps a government where we have to obey their rules, otherwise we don't get paid. Somewhere along the line, throughout our journey of life, we tend to end up in a relationship. We might get married, we might have children, and quite often, depending on our upbringing, we find that we end up in a similar relationship or environment to the one that we grew up in. And we know how many times have you seen a child in an abusive relationship as a child, only to repeat the very same thing time and time and time again when they're an adult. That's where you can really see the programming come in. This is what they've learned. They've learned by actions, and that's what they know. So that repeat cycle then comes out in adulthood. As we move through life, still, we become more dependent on our relationships or friendships, or perhaps someone to guide us when we're in a global situation, maybe something with our parents. It doesn't really matter. When we go into old age, we no longer may be able to do the things that we were once able to do. So we're dependent mostly on our children or on social services, maybe even moving into an aged care facility. So the whole cycle of life has been designed to create a dependency on authority relationship. Our whole cycle. We often find ourselves in fear of making mistakes or facing rejection, which again reinforces the idea that it's safer to follow than it is to lead. So this cycle guides us to become dependent on rules, on institutions, experts, and so many other things, rather than trusting our intuition and discernment, rather than actually becoming the authority of ourselves, rather than living from a conscious perspective, rather than actually becoming a fully conscious, independent being that we all are and can be. So we know on a global scale, control is maintained through fear, but that's not only on a global scale. This can also be brought back into our personal lives, social groups, personal relationships. We might have a fear of failure. We might have a fear of punishment or rejection. It doesn't really matter what that fear looks like. If we look close enough, we will find pockets of people in our life, even today, who, by not understanding what this process is all about, at some point instill fear, or at some point instill control, try to instill control. We may not, on a bigger scale, might be kept out of our social circles, or we may not be able to visit our families, or we might be forced to do things that we know are wrong, like staying at home for no good reason, locked in our houses for no good reason. You know what I'm talking about here. So fear leads to compliance, where people stay within the approved path instead of thinking critically or forging their own way. When you have fear, you give consent. No matter what the situation is, your fear is your consent. The more you comply, the harder it is, the harder it feels like it is to break free, creating and maintaining that cycle of dependency. So the ultimate dependency challenge is our marriages, our relationships, our friendships, our parents and children relationships, our employer-employee relationships. These dependency challenges are some of the toughest that any of us can face in life, even though it might not appear that way on the surface. So unless two people in any of those situations have been brought up to live in a conscious state, quite often there is one who is the dominant person in a relationship. Now, I just want to make a point here. There is a big difference between a dominant, being dominant and domineering. You may be in a relationship where you are the dominant person, or your partner or your boss or whoever is the dominant person. It doesn't mean to say that they have to be domineering over you. It doesn't mean to say that you have to create a codependency on that particular person, which is generally, as I said before, out of fear. So a dominant person may be more capable, more outgoing, but they also may be more aggressive, stronger emotionally. This person generally takes charge, while the other is more appeasing and follows or obeys, depending on what that situation is. So this difference in people is closely related to the age level of the inner child, with the older age level playing the more dominant role. That relationship may also work very well for you and your partner, your boss, your parents, whoever it is. It is when it becomes a situation without conscious agreement that we start to run into problems. So problems occur with extremely dominant partners and very dependent ones. So let's have a look at cases of extreme dominant spouses and the effects of what that will do. So what it does do is it stunts the personal and spiritual growth of the dependent person. Now, what I want to say here just before I go through these is this. Sometimes you don't even realize that it is happening. This example that we're going to go into after this page is an extreme case, but it's also quite a common case. We quite often find that there are dominant spouses who do try to control us in one way or another. So even though we will be looking at a extreme case, you can always bring that back to you. You can always bring that back to your relationships, your personal relationships, your employee-employer relationships, your parents, friendships, etc., etc. So what it does do is it stunts the personal and spiritual growth of the dependent person. Your self-worth issues deepen. You lose confidence. Eventually, you get to the point where you have no conscious independence. In extreme cases, the person begins to function solely from the programmed subconscious level and physiologically regresses to the age of a preschool child, where you can't even think for yourself. You're unable to survive on your own, and you struggle to survive if the dominant partner is gone. These situations will often cause the unease, the dis-ease in the body. Let's just have a look at an example of this. So cancer of the reproductive organs on a female, the uterus, the cervix, ovaries, is generally caused by two things: male rejection in the overwhelming majority of women, and there have been case studies that have been done on this, most often in a marriage. Studies have shown, as I said, studies have shown this. So two known factors are linked with such a violent male rejection. One is that the partner over a period of years, and the other is to the early upbringing of the female. Now, we've just got two names here. They're not related to anybody. It's just on the screen. So please know that. Also know that I'm just using this particular case history as an example. It applies to men and women equally. There is no difference to that. The principles are the same. Jane and Bob, newly married, very, very happy. Everything's hunky-dory. Over a period of time, it becomes apparent to Jane that Bob's got a few disturbing attitudes or habits, which cause her a great deal of unhappiness. He might become an alcoholic or a tyrant. He's excessively jealous, has affairs, whatever it is that you can think of. Quite often, in a situation of a relationship, the true nature of someone does not actually come out until there is stress for that person on an individual level, or stress in the relationship. So this, of course, affects Jane and Bob's relationship. So at first, Jane makes excuses for him, and then she tries to talk to him. That doesn't work. And eventually, she becomes frustrated, maybe even angry, may live in a state of fear or anxiety. Finally, when all attempts to change the situation has failed, she has only two choices left. She can leave the marriage, or she can put up with the abuse. Many are not strong enough. If they get to this point, are not strong enough to leave the marriage. Use excuses such as children, money, and whatever else that you can come up with, and you'll carry on. And that's where the problems really begin. So the inner child, who we know controls the body and is the seat of all of our emotions, no longer wants any physical contact with the man who is causing it so much pain, or the woman who is causing it so much pain. The physical relationship, however, is an inherent part of marriage. So our clever little child here finds a way to avoid sex. It makes the sex organs sick. At first, it might be just some smaller symptoms, a little pain, maybe some discharge, an occasional infection. But if the emotional situation continues, the physical condition will quite often become acute or even terminal, depending how long and how bad. At this point, maybe a hysterectomy comes along, or other surgery, or some other form of treatment, but it's only a temporary fix, unless the relationship is resolved one way or another. So this kind of reaction takes several years generally, and therefore rarely found out in the early years of marriage. We might decide on a conscious level that we can put up with the negative situation for a certain reason, but the inner child will not, cannot put up with it. If it is deeply hurt emotionally, has no way out, and we consciously do not do anything about that situation, it'd rather give up the body's existence altogether than live in misery. How long this takes depends on how long you can fill your inner child. If you make promises saying, we're going to do this, we're going to make a change, we're going to get out, we're going to this, but you always find a way to stay, you've just crossed your boundaries. You have just caused a disrespect to yourself and to your inner child. And those kinds of tricks that you try to play with yourself is not going to last forever. There is going to come a point where your inner child says, no more. You haven't done the things that you have told me that you're going to do. You have not kept your promises. You haven't even set any boundaries. So guess what? We're out. See you later. Eventually, your body is going to give up. So many, many different sort of scenarios that we could go through here. But the bottom line is, if we don't start to stand in our own authority, if we don't start to address the issues of dependency, then it becomes much more difficult to move forward with our own growth, our own spiritual development, and bring happiness and joy into our lives. So most people, because of dependency, authority, and programming, find themselves in a never-ending loop of victim, aggressor, and savior. So I want to have a look at this a little closer. This is a cycle that goes on. Now, if we take a look here, each of these things, remembering that our inner child picks up on actions of others, we exhibit those behaviors based on learning, unless we break the cycle ourselves. Now, at some point in our lives, we have all played this game, all of us. Most of us continue to play this at some point in our lives, even today, unless we are conscious 100% of the time. So let's have a look at the victim. We've all been in bad situations. If we play the victim, what it means is that we are doing a game of transference of our state, our thoughts, our emotions onto someone else. We are blaming someone else for the things that have happened to us. We're not actually taking responsibility for ourselves, which means that we don't do anything about it. Now, when we play the victim, we will find often a whole raft of victims that will play that game with us. We attract them like flies, because then you can all feel sorry for each other together. Now, I'm not saying that there is not a process. If you have been the subject to or on the end of abuse or anything like that, there is processes of healing that you need to go through. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about the archetype of the victim and what that actually means. So when it happens and you continue to sit in that space of victim, then you are going to continue to be a victim as long as you really want, until you make the conscious decision to change that. Sometimes we'll play the victim and the aggressor. So we've been on the receiving end of all of this aggression as a victim. Sometimes we will make that a transference into playing the game of aggressor or playing the role of the aggressor. When you play that role, it gives you a false sense of power. It makes you feel good for not good, maybe. Well, some people, it makes them feel good. It gives, at an energetic level, it gives you a false sense of power, a false sense of control. Because you do not have control over yourself, you make sure that whatever it is that you can do to have control over someone else, that's going to fulfill your need of the aggressor role. And then you go into savior. You see people who are going through difficult situations continuously. It is everywhere. Most of us would like to be able to save them and save them all. When you play that role, you are denying someone to learn their lesson. That is the simple fact of it. If you are not asked for help and you simply go in and try to save them from a situation, again, I'm not talking about somebody who is getting the life beaten out of them or anything like that. I'm talking about general situations here. You have to remember that that person has chosen this path, and they have chosen this path so that they can learn the lessons that they set up before they come in. And who are you to deny that? Now, when we talk about the role of a savior, we're not talking about giving advice. You can give advice, but it is up to that person as to whether they take that advice or not, as to whether they learn from that situation or not. It is not your job to save them. You can help them, you can guide them, but you cannot save them from their own life. You are doing yourself and them an injustice. So what are the energetic implications of all of this? We have an energetic field around us. Call it the aura, call it the different bodies, call it whatever you like. It expands, as you can see on that slide, it expands right out around us. As we go through our life and we set our program states into place, what that actually does is it puts an imprint in your energetic field. So what you put out there if you're not conscious of it, if you are operating from a state of unconsciousness, that field or the imprint of that field is going to continually send out a vibration. That vibration is going to attract exactly the same vibration back to you. Like energy attracts like energy. All of us are like a radio. We send out energy signals all the time. It broadcasts what we're thinking, what our programs are, what we're doing, what our actions are, because from behind all of our actions are thoughts. So what does that do? That attracts more of the same back to us. It isn't until you consciously change your thoughts, you take action to implement those changes, which is your intent, and you have the emotion behind it so that you change that energy field. There have been many, many, many instances where people have really changed the way they think about something when they start to take responsibility for their lives, their actions, their reactions, their emotional states, the situations that they are in, when they integrate the lessons that they have set up for themselves, your whole world changes. When you start to make that change mentally and you follow that up by action, all of this world, this mental world, this field that sits around us changes. And we start to attract back into us the things that we want. People start to come back into our lives. We might out of the blue get a phone call from somebody that we haven't heard from for a long time, because you are now in a vibrational state that is equal to what theirs is. Now, don't get me wrong. There are going to be challenges and major ones along the way when we start to go along that process. But you see, as you start to integrate knowledge, as you start to integrate those lessons, as you start to operate from a different place, then there is always going to be a test for you just to make sure you've got it. When you know that your actions and your reactions differ from what they did previously when you were in that previous state, that lesson's integrated and you won't see it again. What we put out, we get back. Now, this ties very nicely in with our energy exchange. So we're going to talk about an energy exchange on a personal level here. All of our interactions that we have with everybody, we send out an etheric cord. It also leaves a imprint, like a signature. So your blood, your fingertips, a lot of people who do healing will use blood or skin or hair because there is an etheric connection between the person and that fluid or whatever it is that you have from the body. So when you have an energy exchange, particularly, let's bring it back to the personal relationships. Let's say you're in an argument with someone. What actually happens here is the person that starts an argument throws out an etheric cord and it hooks into you. Now, because they are not operating from a conscious state, because there is anger in that, what they are doing is they are drawing energy from you. They are literally sucking the life out of you, your energy. When you respond, you do the same. You throw an energy cord out to them and you start taking some of that energy back. This is what the exchange does. It happens on an individual level, on a group level, and on a global level. If you are operating from a conscious state, you draw energy from the universe. It's a universal energy. You have enough energy to fill you up. You actually start operating from a level where you don't need to incite anger. You don't need to incite fear because you are now at a conscious level where you can have a discussion with that person. You don't need to hook into them to try and deplete them of their energy, because when you deplete them of their energy in your mind on a subconscious level, they are now in a weaker position and they do the same to you. So when you have an argument, mostly what you don't remember is what it was about. 10 years down the track, you can't remember what that argument was about. Subconsciously, you know, because you've just stolen someone's energy, their own personal energy, rather than taking the energy that you need, which is in abundance everywhere and never, ever runs out. So think about that. Think about what happens on that energetic level when you are in a heated discussion with someone. Know that it is not just the words that are being exchanged, but know that there is this energy exchange back and forwards, which is not beneficial to either of you. We are all on a journey of learning. This life is the biggest playground of learning that we could possibly ever hope for. And we need to deeply, deeply, deeply understand that being in this physical body, we've chosen those lessons to grow mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We create them. We create them to give ourselves and the other people involved the best opportunity to learn lessons before we come into the body. It is worthwhile repeating until that point there is integrated. And when that point there is integrated, you start to look at things from a completely different perspective. When you know the other person, the other entity, or this other whatever is there to give you the best opportunity to learn, when you integrate that fully and wholly, your perspective changes. You become grateful for it once you've been through the whole process and you've gone through the emotions, you've done your grieving for whatever that situation was. Eventually you get back to that point where you become grateful for the lesson. You become grateful for their participation in the lesson because you are now so much further down the track and the integration of knowledge has happened. There should be no guilt, no shame whatsoever if we find ourselves repeating situations, which quite often we do. Goodness knows, I can tell you throughout my life, I've given myself repeat lessons constantly. Some of us just take a little bit longer to integrate those lessons. Just ask my mum and dad. What we're doing here is we are giving ourselves another opportunity to learn what we need to. We don't learn the lessons the next time. We set it up. We give ourselves another opportunity to learn it. What it does do, if that situation was quite small the first time, you'll find the next time it's going to be a bit bigger, a bit harder, a bit more confronting. You don't learn it then, you're going to escalate it again. You are going to escalate that lesson again the next time and the next time. Some of us get to a point where we are so low, we think that we cannot go any lower before we actually start to take responsibility and have a look at how we can change our life, what we can learn from those situations, what we can integrate, what our boundaries now are so that we don't have to go back there again. There should also be no guilt and no shame in making mistakes. We're all our own worst enemy. We're all the harshest critics of ourselves. So be kind to yourself. Our mistakes often provide the greatest learning opportunity that we could ever have. Guilt and shame, it only reaffirms that you're not worthy, and you so are, because this is the journey of life. When we begin to awaken, we start breaking free from the illusion of control that has kept us in a state of consciousness for millennia. Many of you, particularly over the last few years, have realized that that is what's happened. But awakening is not just about gaining knowledge. It's about applying knowledge. It's about integrating knowledge. It's about shifting your vibration. It's about shifting your perception, your consciousness in a way that fundamentally alters how you experience life. So by understanding this process, both on a personal and a global level, we create a higher vibrational shift individually and planetarily. We become less affected by fear-based programming. The illusion of separation and authority starts to fall away. We become more connected to nature. Our intuition becomes stronger. We start to operate from a higher level of consciousness. Our perception expands beyond physical reality, and that allows us to see the subtle manipulations at play. not just on the global scheme, but in your personal life as well. You recognize these things. You recognize what is unfolding. All of this process changes the energy field around us. And when you understand that the world is not happening to you, it is responding to you, you start to take the responsibility for your energy, for your choices, and for your beliefs. So instead of waiting for permission or validation, you begin to step into your role as the creator of your life. You don't let things happen to you anymore. It's not an easy process. But once you start, there's no going back. You can never, ever, ever go back to not knowing. Never. You move from being a passive participant in a controlled system to a conscious creator of your reality, which then affects those around you, which then affects those around them, which then spreads out to the planet, the solar system, the universe, the multi-universe, eventually all adding up to an integration of lessons into source. So let's have a look at a way forward. So to move out of this cycle, we need to really shift from being obedient to using our discernment, from fear to having trust in yourself, from seeking validation to self-acceptance, from following blindly into creating consciously. So the first step to regain our independence is awareness. Many of you will have that already. An awareness that external authority is not the ultimate truth, no matter on what scale, personal, social, global. It does not matter. You are the real authority of your life. So we then need to identify who the authority figures are in our lives that may be having an impact on them. Your inner child comes into play here. It is the part of you that is dependent, who submits to authority, and who often feels the fear and pressure, the helplessness imposed by an authority figure. When we know who they are, we can then learn to deal with them constructively. So over the next couple of weeks, when you've got a quiet moment, connect to your inner child. If you weren't here on the last session, you can go to the Telegram page. There's a PDF in there which will give you a way forward to be able to connect with your inner child. If you have done the exercises and you haven't got a name, keep working with it. It will come. So connect with your inner child by calling it by its name. Once you've got that dialogue open, ask it, who do you feel has got control over you? Who do you look to for validation and permission? Where do you feel restricted, unheard, or powerless? So once you recognize the key authority figures in your life, then it's important to take some time to process those emotions and your thoughts constructively. If it helps, write it down or talk to a friend. Often writing things down or verbalizing brings clarity of thought and you can see things much more clearly. Ask yourself these questions. What role have I played in this dynamic? What lessons am I meant to learn from this situation? Am I taking full responsibility for myself, or am I relying on others to shape my reality? As I said before, it's much easier to blame someone else for our problems. What it actually does when we do that is keeps us in a state of dependency. It keeps us trapped in the cycle. Your personal empowerment comes from owning your choices and deciding for yourself on how to move forward with those choices. So before moving on to the next step, it is important to know that fear and assumptions generally magnify a situation in our heads. We often construct a worst case scenario in our minds. We haven't even got to a situation and already we've got World War III going on in our heads and nothing's even happened. So we're creating a situation of angst, anxiety, which is potentially, I'm not saying in all situations, potentially making a mountain out of a molehill. Because quite often that will take us into the actual physical situation from a place of fear rather than a place of power and calm. So a little trick, I love this meditation and I'm going to bring this up at the end of it. before you talk to somebody in a situation, now you can use this meditation not just for this, you can use it for a job interview before you go have a whatever it is that you might be going, always from a benevolent perspective. Never use this for detrimental purposes. Well, you can if you want, but you must be prepared to pay the consequences of your actions. So this is a very, very powerful tool. Use it wisely and use it from a perspective of love and for making positive progression in your life. So before you speak to someone, you can do a meditation. You have a conversation with them. You have the job interview. You have whatever it is in a safe space that you have created. We'll go through that meditation in detail. I can tell you, I do this meditation. I have done this meditation throughout my life for every single job interview I have gone to and wanted, and I have never, ever not gotten the job, ever. People have done this meditation and they have seen people literally change their attitude towards them wholly and completely. It is very powerful. So if you find yourself overthinking things or focusing on and intensifying a situation, try redirecting your energy into seeing a positive outcome. Redirect what you are actually thinking. Be aware of your thoughts and change them to what it is you want to see the outcome of, so long as it is for the highest good of all. Start to work on your boundaries. Figure out what it is that you will and won't accept. Work on locking those boundaries in. You will be tested. You will be tested. You can bend boundaries, but you break them, this is where you run into problems. Work it out with a friend if you need to. Talk it through with someone. But ultimately, no one can tell you what your boundaries are. You have to figure them out for yourself. Then go to the next step of talking with the person about what you're thinking, feeling, doing, if you can. Let them know what you expect from them, where you're at. They may not have any idea. So they may not even know how to respond to you in any other way, either through their own programming or because you've allowed it for so long. So they may not know what you're thinking. Quite often, you will find, if you come from a place of love, you may find it's just enough because now they know. You have verbalized where you're at. You've verbalized what's okay and what's not okay for you. Now, quite often, people will respond to that in a conversation. Some don't. There are, as I said, always exceptions to the rule. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, a situation may no longer align with your highest good or the other person's. So if all attempts have been made to address the issue, it may be time to reconsider your whole situation. Remember, this is your journey. You have free will. You have choices. So long as you operate from the place of the highest good, from the place of love, then it will be for the highest good of everybody. Always trust your intuition. Your gut will always tell you when something feels right or wrong. The key to that is learning to listen and act accordingly. Your gut tells you. When someone says something, and you should even be doing this while we're here and we're talking about these things. If something doesn't agree with you, you will get a millisecond of a pang in your gut. Most often we're not being conscious, so we're not even aware of it. Find yourself in a situation, you can take yourself back to that situation, to the very start, for example, of a conversation, tune into yourself, into your gut, and see what that gut response is. That's how you can actually start to use and develop your discernment. It will grow and it will become a natural part of you then. So how do we break this cycle? Because it is a huge cycle. It's a global cycle. It's been in for thousands of years with our children. But children learn from what we do more so than what we say. If we want them to become independent, conscious beings, we have to ensure we become that ourselves. We have to act and live in that way. So when we consciously shift our approach to parenting, we empower our children to become emotionally intelligent, self-aware, and independent. We teach them to ask questions, question everything, challenge authority, but with respect. Teach them critical thinking. Teach yourself critical thinking. It's one of the most powerful things that you can teach yourself and a child. Include them in decision making, especially when it involves them. Now, this doesn't mean to say that you give them run over their lives. That experience cannot be there from a child unless they remember their past lives, right? So direct them with questions which will give the outcome, which is for the highest good of them, but it makes them feel like that they are making the decision about themselves. They are participating in their own life. They are then becoming an independent thinker about what the best choice is. Encourage them to work with their inner child. Listen to their intuition. That veil when you're a child is much, much less. It's much more fluid than when you become an adult. As a child, you don't have all of that programming to inhibit your thoughts and your minds. So you've got access to a whole lot more integration of knowledge when you are in those early stages. Know that your role as a parent is as a teacher and a guide. Offer them the choices and let them experience the consequences naturally. We want to shield our children. This applies to us as well and ourselves from learning these things because it might be painful. If we don't learn them, then we create the dependency cycle. We create the need to look for some external validation. Build trust rather than force obedience. They will naturally seek guidance rather than rebellion. Limit exposure to programming. Try to eat healthy, natural food. Spend time in nature. There is many, many, many more things that we can do to break the cycle, but it all starts with you and you alone. Only you can do you. It is my favorite saying of you do you. It has so many more connotations than just you worry about you and I'll worry about me. You do you means that you work on you first. As you progress spiritually, emotionally, mentally, what you are learning will naturally flow out of you to your children and to those around you. I'm going to go through these in a moment. So I'm just going to do a little summary and then I'm going to come back to something that I want to leave you on. So throughout this, remember that you are the creator of your own reality. The power is in you. It's there already. You are stronger than you know. Trust your inner wisdom and your divine connection. Begin to step into your own power. No external authority can define your path. It's yours. You just need to recognize it. Knowledge alone is not enough. Apply what you learn. Embody it. Walk in it. Integrate it. Make it a part of every cell of your being. True power is not in domination or submission, but it is in unity, it is in love, and it's collaboration with yourself, with others, and with Source. Step into your destiny with courage, with love, and with the knowing that you are divinely guided always. You're not here to be a follower. You're here to awaken. This path is yours to walk. And thankfully, we have many of us walking this path now. So not only is it yours to walk, it is also ours to help each other.